Wagon Wheel Sports Week 6 weekend wrap up. And what a weekend it was. Very wild. Just let's start off with the 11 a.m. games, starting with Arkansas and Ole Miss. I sadly did not get to watch a whole lot of this game, but the little I did was very electric. I checked in back and forth with this and the OU game. Let me just tell you, Arkansas and KJ Jefferson have something really special there, and Arkansas fans should be very excited for what this team can do going forward, especially with Bryden Odom. If they can hang on to him after this season, going forward is going to be a special team. Ole Miss, they're right there with Arkansas. If they can keep everybody and the players can stay healthy, this team will be very good, and both of them should be finishing top 3 in the SEC West for sure. KJ Jefferson comes in and shows out. 25-35, 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. He is just going baller mode right here. And, you know, when he's throwing the ball like he is and he can run the ball, he is a spectacular player to watch and is exciting and very hard for defenses to shop, which showed in this game, very much so, as well as when you add up on top of Arkansas's running back with Sanders having 17 carries and 139 yards. When you get the duo there, it's hard to stop, though Georgia didn't seem to have a problem with that. Arkansas going for the 2-point conversion. You know, I like the call, aggressive, and going to it. When your defenses are playing like old Big 12 style, just shoot out, who can be the first one to stop somebody. I understand, especially going for 2 there at the end of the game, aggressive. So that they didn't get it. That's just the way it falls sometimes. Going on the other side with Ole Miss, Matt Corral, 14 of 21, 287 yards and 2 touchdowns is a great number. Other than his Alabama game, he has played exceptionally well, and he is looking at a very good, he'll probably be in New York come Heisman time. I mean, if he continues to play like he is, I don't see a problem in why he wouldn't be there, with the rest of the gang being Bryce Young for sure, probably somebody out of Georgia. I can't think of the name off the top of my head right now, but would not be surprised to be there with that clan. 3 SEC players on top of that. Parrish coming in with Ole Miss as running back with 18 carries and 111 yards. Overall, this was just a old school Big 12 shootout game. Something really that I kind of expected from this game, that being a toss-up. They both very equal teams, and Ole Miss was the one who eventually stood up and made that happen at the end of the day. Transitioning now into the other game that happened at 11 a.m., Oklahoma and Texas. And where to begin with this game? This is the game that I really focused a lot of my attention on this weekend. Number one, being a fan of the Sooners, and then just, you know, the way the game unfolded was just a great game to watch. Texas easily for the first 3 quarters played better than Oklahoma and really showed out against the Sooners. But Oklahoma in the 4th quarter came to play, and Caleb Williams in the second half really stepped up after Rattler being benched. Rattler started the game 8 of 15, 111 yards and an interception and a fumble. So by then he got benched. Williams came in for 1 drive on the 4th and 1 and ran for a 66-yard touchdown to come into the game to really start things up. As well as Williams, finished the game 16 of 25, 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. And really leading this comeback win, which nobody, including myself, did not see happening. Williams played exceptionally well. And really considering, I don't think this is just a solely Rattler didn't play well type of thing. The offensive line for Oklahoma really stepped up, especially into the second half of the game. Kennedy Brooks had 25 carries, 217 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, when you look at it from the standpoint of, yes, Caleb Williams made better plays at the time that needed to happen. He was more poised up in the pocket. He would step up, make a throw here and there. But those are things that we've seen out of Rattler too. And I think the biggest thing with Spencer Rattler is that the offensive line is not blocking and not making holes to get the running backs room. Kennedy Brooks has really not been able to show out like he has been against Texas, like he did today or Saturday. And he was finally able to do that because of the blocking from Oklahoma's O-line. And they really showed what they can be and what they can do. And I really feel like even if Williams wasn't put in, that Rattler could have done these same things if the line just blocked. So it makes you wonder why the O-line can block the second half, but weren't able to do that in the first half, and what the difference of that made, or if it was just scheming that they changed up. So Williams comes in, balls out. Marvin Mims has 5 receptions, 136 yards, and 2 touchdowns. While on the other side, and we flip the script, Casey Thompson had 20 of 34, 388 yards, and 5 touchdowns. For the first 3 quarters, Texas was easily. At one point, they had a 97.2% chance to win the game with, I believe, 2 minutes and 5 seconds left in the third quarter. Texas had this game won. Oklahoma's defense stepped up and played some ball, and with the lead behind Caleb Williams, just changed the game. Bijan Robinson, 20 carries, 137 yards, and a touchdown. He played as like the best running back in college football for 3 quarters. After that, they stopped. They couldn't get anywhere with their line, and their defense was crashing down. In the first half of the game, Texas was averaging on 3rd down and yards to go, 3rd and 5-ish, around there. While in the second half, they were averaging 3rd and 11, 11.2, 11.7. So there's a big difference there in the pressure and the amount of people that Oklahoma was being able to get into the backfield. Xavier Worthy, 9 receptions, 261 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Texas's offense balled and really has made a change for since the Arkansas game. Texas has come out and completely changed their scheme of offense and was able to push in and be like, hey, this is how we want to run the ball, and this is how we want to run our offense, and this is how we're going to do it. And they've shown that in these last few games, including this one. This is what you're going to expect out of this Texas team, I believe, here in the future as well. I would not be surprised to see a Oklahoma-Texas Big 12 championship come December, likely being like it is now. If Oklahoma continues the path they're on, where these offensive line is getting blocks, running backs are able to run, and depending on who the quarterback may be, being able to throw and be poised and make sprints when he needs to, Oklahoma's offense is going to continue to get better. The defense continue to stay on that average to a little above average, and then Oklahoma is going to be okay. Looking forward into the future for them is kind of the big thing. Who do you start, Williams or Rattler? I know a lot of the fans are saying start Williams. And I mean, from what we've seen out of him in one game, granted it is the one game, I think a lot of people would be saying to start Williams over Rattler. It's going to be dependent on what Coach Riley is wanting to do. If he's going to trust Rattler to come out against TCU and play some ball, or what's going to happen from there. I personally would probably start Williams to see if he can give him another game to do what he did in that Texas game. Does he come in as like a one fluke? Texas just wasn't prepared to see Williams, and they just were like shook off a little bit, and then he just did that? Or was that Williams is this much better than Rattler, and he's going to give you the best chance to compete for a Big 12 championship and a national championship? So that's things is going to have to consider. If you start Williams and he comes out and he balls for a couple games, then it's like, okay, maybe he is this much better than Rattler is. But if you start Rattler and he does the same thing, like he did last year in the back half of the season, then I think you can say either one would be a safe choice. So it's going to be dependent. Maybe play a little of both, see who does better, and go on from there. Now we go on to our biggest surprise of the weekend, and that is that number 1 Alabama falls to an unranked Texas A&M team, losing 41-38 on a last-second field goal from Texas A&M. I think the biggest takeaway from this game that I saw was that Alabama's O-line and D-line were the biggest weakness of the game. Alabama did not control either line of scrimmage, and Texas A&M really did what they wanted to on either side of the ball. You know, what does this say for Alabama moving forward? Because right now they no longer hold the playoff spot in their hands. They could get different places, and they're going to need some help, especially when they have to look down the line and see Georgia possibly looming for them in the SEC championship. Alabama's going to have to adjust. They have to. If you continue to play like that game, you're going to have teams coming in that's looking down the line, as in Arkansas, possibly in Auburn, that's going to give you trouble. And especially if you can get through the rest of your schedule unscathed, getting into the SEC championship game against Georgia is going to be a big problem. Alabama will lose that game, and it will probably not be a close game because Georgia is playing very dominant football right now. Have allowed 1 touchdown all year, and we're 6 games into the season. Their defense is stout, and it's very good. The Georgia offense is starting to get rolling, especially. They're putting up points. And Georgia right now is just looking like the top dog, which is why I've had them there for a while in my rankings at number 1, because they're looking like the part. Alabama have tumbled, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go from there. With that being said, looking at it, Georgia is the sole team in the SEC that looks like they can completely control their own destiny going into the playoff. Georgia, it's really their time to take over the SEC right now because the rest of their schedule is fairly lackluster. They have Florida, Kentucky this week, which I don't see that being an issue for Georgia, being the way they are playing. I think it's going to be a cakewalk, and I think that that'll be rather easy for them. With the mentioning of Georgia in the playoff race, really looking broader, especially now that Alabama is gone, who do you have that's going to be there in the playoff? Georgia seems to be that number 1 team in the number 1 spot. Now, looking at it, you have Georgia, several teams in the Big Ten, Oklahoma, and Cincinnati being your really strongest cases. Oregon is kind of there, which will get to move up if they continue to win in their schedule, as well as the Big Ten just eating each other alive. Because right now we have Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa, and then Penn State is still in there a little bit. The Big Ten is looking like it could very well eat itself alive. There are so many teams that has that shot that it's going to be very hard for any one team to make it out of that gauntlet and that stretch of everything to come out undefeated. That being said, if that team does, that team is an automatic bid into the playoff, as it should, being that team. So your Big Ten champion, Georgia, Oklahoma, if they can come out in the Big 12 and get their offense rolling, they're going to be that undefeated champion, and there's your 3 spots. Now with that, you have your 1 final spot, to which if Cincinnati can go out and win the AAC, do they get that spot? Does a possible 2-loss Alabama get that spot? Does some random other Big Ten team get that spot? And where does that go? I think right now, Cincinnati's chances are looking very good if they can continue to win out through their schedule. BYU losing this week to Boise State helps out Cincinnati a lot because now you're not competing with, say, well, this BYU team has this bigger, better Power 5 schedule, so why wouldn't they get in over a Cincinnati? whose two Power 5 games, Indiana and Notre Dame, aren't looking as great as it might have once has. So your biggest argument is going to be, well, what about a second Big Ten team, or what about a second SEC team? Which, if Georgia goes and takes care of Bama, then that should sort itself out, as well as maybe one loss or undefeated Oklahoma team. So really, if I'm going to make a midseason lineup and projection, I would probably say, to be very safe, Georgia is number one, a Big Ten champion as a number two, Oklahoma as a three, and then a Cincinnati as a four. Right now, looking at it, I don't see Georgia losing to Bama. If they did, that would be a tough decision for the committee to make for sure. But I see Georgia beating Bama in the SEC championship, and then knocking them out of the playoff contention for sure. Being Georgia the Big Ten champion, which who knows who that's going to be right now. Considering you have Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State all vying for that spot. We don't know. And they could very well eat themselves alive and lose 2 or 3 games each, which knocks them possibly out. And then Cincinnati, who should very well likely go undefeated the rest of the way. And that being said, this is literally the best time for a Cincinnati and a group of 5 team to get into the playoff. And if you're rooting for that, then this is your year for it. Finally, we're going to close it out. This week's pick'em, I went 6-4. So back to the usual guesstimations. And we are now 30-17 all time in our pick'ems. And to close it out, I'm just going to roughly give my top 10 for the week. Starting out with Georgia, my top 4. Georgia, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Cincinnati in the top 4. My first 2 out being Ohio State and Michigan. With those 3 teams, Iowa, Ohio State, and Michigan, going to be settling that out later on in the season for which Big Ten team is going to be in that top 4. At 7, Alabama, Penn State at 8, Michigan State at 9, and then rounding out our top 10, Oklahoma State. Thanks for joining us with this week's episode of Weekend Wrap Up. Until next week, see you later.